Duke IPA.
Here we are, brother.
Show.
We're finally here.
That's right. We're here at Asa's house. We've got Supernova. We've got two in XTR10. We got a Stringer DPS epoxy. And I think we should let our community in basically how it all started.
You mean the 2-year journey?
Yeah, that's right.
Well, man, you know, actually, I was really thrown off when you called me up and you're like, hey, you want to design a board with me? And I was like, for real? I was like, all right. And then you're like, but it has to do this, and this. I took a deep breath and I said, yeah, I can do that.
Yeah. So let's talk about that phone call, because it's kind of interesting. Like for me, this kind of category of surfboard, who I am as a surfer, I've always liked to quiver.
Sure.
It's never been one board does all things, right? So I like grovelers with a hybrid outline. I like, you know, small wave performance boards. I like daily drivers, high performance short boards. I'm surfing, you know, like knee high to like a little overhead on the regular, especially living in Southern California.
Totally.
And Supernova has its specific wave range.
Which was a tricky range.
Yeah.
Because it's a really tight area.
Yeah.
You know, you're all around surfboards that are kind of made to like handle that,
Yeah.
but to really like tackle that specific zone, which was, you know, like what, shoulder high,
Shoulder
max?
high, head high max, depending on how punchy or hollow it gets. So, you know, I'm calling this, and I'm not the first one to come up with it, but I want to say it's a performance groveler. And what separates the Supernova from, like, you know, a groveler with a wide nose is what I would say that's more of a hybrid type board.
Sure.
Is something that's just got a little bit sleeker up in the nose area. As your brother would say, trimming the fat. That's what he likes to say, right? I'm sure that
100%.
came from your dad too, right?
Yeah, 100%. And you know, like to that point, sure, there's a lot of grovelers out there, but they're just that. They're grovelers. They look grovelly.
Yeah.
So part of like the task, the goal was to create a board that looked like greased lightning,
Yeah.
but could grovel.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like there's a bunch of the board manufacturers doing small wave performance boards, and yourself, they're doing them really well. The 2 to 6 foot, 2 to 5 foot board. You know what I mean? Tons of them out there. It's the list is a mile long of boards that I've written that are
There's
excellent.
A sea of models out
Yeah,
there, for sure.
However, I feel like this 1 to 3 foot mushy board category with a pointed nose, the right rocker.
Yeah, something that actually someone on the CT or QS could jump on and not get, you know, looked at funny because he's on like a alternative grovelly looking board.
Right. Yeah, the blunt nose throws off a lot of people.
Sure.
Right. So that's what my thing with you. I'm like, hey, I want it to have a pointed nose. I want it to be about 5'4" to 5'6". Like there's a certain length of board that I'm looking for, because I want a decent amount of rail line so I can surf top to bottom and have the drive. And then I'm like, I remember talking to you about the rocker. I'm like, bro, this has to be the fastest board I have ever ridden. That was like the #1 point that I was trying to get with
Yeah, you wanted it to be borderline out of control.
That's right. Those are my exact words. And I remember like the first version felt pretty good. Iteration 2 felt so good until I took it out to some of the point breaks.
And then you call me and say, hey bro, I got a problem. I'm like, what's wrong? And you're like, the board works too good. I'm like, what?
Because I had something in mind. I surfed one of the point breaks in Southern California. There was some sets that were coming in that were overhead, and I came in, dropped in on a right, did a looping bottom turn with all kinds of traction and hold, got to get it somewhat pretty vertical, and I'm thinking, this board's not supposed to do that.
Yeah, it was supposed to give before that.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's so fast that it's gonna slide out.
No.
Because I want this thing to be that kind of speed. And so I'm like, no, it goes too good in overhead surf. You're like, wait. I'm like, scrap that. We've got to get less rocker. I want less rocker.
Yeah, you literally told me, how flat of a rocker can we get away with and it still work?
Yeah, because that's the other challenge. A lot of shapers out there, and I think this category doesn't like there's not a ton of them, because there's like something specific that needs to happen when you have like a performance fish rocker, like you've called it, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's relatively flat. I mean, let me turn it this way. It's really doesn't have a ton of rocker.
Nope.
And boards that are this flat, you can get them going real fast down the line, but as soon as you want to do a turn, it argues with you.
Yep.
Like it bogs up here or it bogs back here, because they just, unless the wave's super flat, it just doesn't want to do it. And then you have to surf from really far off the tail just to get a nice crisp turn, right?
Yep, yep. And you know, like the performance fish rockers, right? They come from a standard fish rocker, which is like, you're not really creating anything brand new.
Right.
I mean, this is something that's from the 70s.
Right.
You know, what we did that was new was incorporated other elements to where we could have all the drive that you could swallow, but it's still pivot on a dime.
Right.
With control.
Let's talk about pivot. Let's talk about that. Why don't you break down a little bit of the board attributes for us? We can maybe, well, let's turn it this way, because I think bottom contours are super important.
Yeah.
And then why don't you talk about the things that you think are important to help this thing go rail to rail and get the pivot it's getting?
So I think the most important part in the chemistry of this board was actually the outline. So we played around with the wide point forward, wide point back, and we ended up zeroing it out right in the center.
Yeah.
But one problem that we felt was right when we got to version 4 that you loved, you know, once you got it under Ace's feet, it was dog shit.
Right, because he's a heavily front-footed surfer and I'm more of a back-footed surfer.
Yep.
Right, so it was catching all over the place. It was super unforgiving for him. The more he drove it off the front foot, the more it would catch and bog, and I was like, ugh. I watched the footage. He was super frustrated on the board. I sent you clips and we were back to the drawing board again.
Completely. And it's funny because I think the saving grace in that was zeroing the wide point out right in the center and then pushing the limits of how straight this part of the outline, how straight we could make it.
Yeah.
But it still have enough curve to do what we needed to do in the face of the wave when you're maneuvering. And part of what really helped that to where we could get away with such a straight part of the outline here was this abrupt break in what I'm calling a null wing, an N-U-L-L wing, not a null wing.
Yeah, that's embarrassing.
I thought of zero wing, but null is it's zero, right? And this isn't a wing, this isn't a bump, it's an extremely abrupt bump, but not a wing.
Yeah, almost like a kink, you said.
It's a kink.
Yeah.
And wow, that's the other element is the rail line. So like to complement the outline itself, we had to kind of figure out how to take advantage of the straight rail line, take advantage of the break in the outline, but give it an element of both explosive out of control with control.
Yeah.
So what I did is I treated it like a wing. I gave it a hard edge to the break and then put a kink in the rail line.
Yep.
Which you probably got it and looked at it and was like, what is that?
Yeah.
But I really feel like those attributes allowed us to still keep a wide tail and give it an enormous amount of braking power.
Yeah.
That I've seen you like take full benefit of.
Yeah, the pivot on the board with it having such low rocker overall is second to nothing I've ridden. Like it's getting, you can do the quickest, tightest turn and get super vertical on the rebound, front side and backside roundhouses. Like some of the best I've ever done, especially at Waco. And the wider tail walks just carrying not only just down the line speed, but the quickness from top to bottom. It's so addicting. Like it's like a drug. It's really moving that fast. I can be a little bit behind and just put the board on rail, and it has like an explosiveness of speed just to get me back where I want.
You're getting me all amped up right now.
Bro, I'm telling you, this board is such a fun board to ride, and it's super hard to get off of. Now, iteration 5, you made those changes. Asa surfed it and started surfing a lot better, and we were both encouraged. Then we sent one to the East Coast to our other heavily front-footed surfer, Eric Peterson.
Yep.
And we thought we nailed iteration 5 because Asa was surfing better, but we wanted to test it in some really mushy East Coast Florida waves. And Eric said, it's not that good. He was like, yeah, it's kind of fast. It's kind of working, but for as low a rocker as it had, I thought it would be a lot faster. And that put us back to the drawing board again.
Yeah. You know, and what has been super challenging was taking all the feedback from very different surfers.
Yeah.
It's one thing designing a board for a single surfer.
Right.
It's another completely different thing to make a board work really well for a front-footed surfer, a back-footed surfer, a surfer on the East Coast that surfs shin-high waves,
Yeah.
a surfer at lowers that's surfing a nice, juicy head-high wave.
Yeah.
And bring it all together.
Sure.
And somehow over the, I don't know, I think it was 12 different versions.
I noticed that the board's throwing a lot more spray compared to iteration 5, the board with the red rails. It was doing great smooth turns, feeling like it had the flow and the speed, but it really wasn't throwing that much spray.
Yeah.
Even though it's an inch shorter than this one, this is throwing significant spray compared to that one. And I really feel like it's a combination of the changes that you made.
100%, man, 100%. The other attributes on the bottom of the board, I mean, my stock bottoms, what I typically do are roll, single, double with V with double. Almost every one of my boards has that, but it's in varying degrees and location of where the double breaks, how the V is pronounced. One thing that we did in the final version was we kind of mellowed out a little bit of the double concave going out the tail.
Sure.
Which I think gave it that extra spice, and it made it work good for Eric on the East Coast.
Yeah.
But I tell you what, like, the challenge was immense. I tell everyone that I talk to about this that it was a very humbling experience, because I come from 60 plus years of surfboard knowledge coming from my father, where he's given us all of these like ingredients, and literally I know if I put A, B, C, and D together, I can have a magic board.
Right.
Which it just took that to a whole different level.
Now, one of the other things I wanted to talk about is the 5-fin setup. Loving it, like super addicting twin plus trailer and quad. For me, I really don't choose to ride a thruster fin setup in 1 to 3 foot mushy waves.
Sure.
The fact that you can run twin plus trailer and quad, bro, it's so fast, it's silky. My boards, like when I'm talking about designing a board, it's gotta have not just speed, it's gotta have flow. Like the transition from turn to turn, I want it to be seamless. I don't like 2-pump bottom turns, especially in my own surfing. And where you put the fin boxes, bro, you nailed it.
You know, that was like one of the most consistent themes in the design process. Is I had a specific fin configuration in mind for this, and I started from every iteration had the same exact fin setup.
Sick.
And it was just something I felt super comfortable about.
Right.
Which I'm stoked it worked out.
Yeah, good job on that. Now, I rode it as a thruster at the pool, and it felt great. Like, usually when you go from a twin plus trailer or a quad to a thruster, the thruster's quite a bit tighter, and you can get more drive. There's more pivot. You can push harder. I didn't feel like it tightened the board up in a bad way. I felt like, man, I stepped on it right as a thruster, and I was like, boom, there it is. It was like, still had that loose, drivey feel to it.
Which is interesting, because usually when you tighten up a cluster like that with a thruster, it is going to make it kind of like feeling.
And it didn't feel that way at all.
Yeah, I think a lot of that has to do with how the forward fins are placed in relationship to the outline, the break in the outline.
Right.
That has a lot to do with it.
Sick.
I heard Asa stole one of your boards.
Asa stole one, and that moves me into construction. It's super funny because every iteration you made us, we started with stringered EPS epoxy.
Yeah, just because like that's your known factor, right? That's something that you're used to, you know how it reacts, and you don't have to think, was it the construction?
Yeah, it's familiar.
It's familiar.
It's the closest feeling to a PU poly with the wood stringer, because the wood stringer pop is something I've been riding forever.
Sure.
Right? So I know that the EPS foam and the epoxy resin has a little bit more pop compared to a PU poly, but this board right here, when it came in, started riding it, and I was like, this board is magic. And I'm really careful about saying that because I want to sign off on the model.
I just took a deep breath when you said that.
I want to sign off on the model, but we hadn't given it to Asa, and then we hadn't made one for the East Coast at Eric yet. So that's kind of like we've got to go through our process. But when I got off this board, I let Asa ride it, and it's been at his house here in the garage locked up for safekeeping. I asked him for it the other day, and he had his cat-like claws on it. He's like, no, my brother. He's like, this is my board. So, you know, Asa fell in love with it.
Which is, again, amazing because version 4 for him was a complete dog.
Yeah.
And now he loves it to death and won't let it go.
Yeah, and he's a good sport. It was hard to watch him struggle on it, but that's part of the testing process.
And the honesty, like, you can't beat that.
Yeah.
I hate nothing more than someone saying, oh, it works great. Okay.
But why aren't you writing it? So the other thing I wanted to mention is, then we went to XTR10. And this is 5.5 at 26 liters. This is 5.5 at 26. And you shaped me a 5.6 at 27.5, which all are stock dims and stock volume.
Yep.
And I'd be riding probably 27.5 at 5.6 in the ocean because I'm 172 pounds.
Yep.
And I've been riding this in the pool, and this feels excellent too. It feels a little bit more rigid, like it's offering a little bit more pop, projection, and drive. I have messed up more waves on this board because it takes a little bit getting used to with how fast it's loading when I load it. And it gets into that lip, it's a little bit more explosive, so I'm getting to the lip a little bit faster.
Sure.
That throws off the timing. But once I settled in and got the timing, I got some great waves on both constructions.
Well, I'm a fan of both, a fan of this just because of the familiarity.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of the XTR just for its explosive character. But just like you said, there's a learning curve to it.
Right.
But the learning curve is sometimes worth sticking in for.
Absolutely.
The payoff is something. But if I would suggest to a customer, I would probably tell them to start off with the EPS epoxy, get familiar with the design itself because the design is so unique.
Yeah.
And then move over to an XTR.
It was funny, I passed the board around the 5.6, 27.5 liter to just some of the folks that surf Waco on the regular. Guys I'd never met before. I'm like, hey, would you mind trying those? This is my new board, the Supernova. It's going to be coming out soon. They're like, oh yeah, for sure, let me ride it. They couldn't stay next to the pocket. They said every time they stood up, it just was going so fast that they found themselves out on the shoulder. They're like, how do I? I'm like, bro, you got to look back. This board wants to just take off.
Which is rad because when we were talking about what to call it, which I hate naming boards, is like naming your kids, like it's awful. But you, like, out the gate, you're like, bro, this thing explodes like a supernova. And I was like, oh, damn.
You know, I feel like there's little bursts of explosions of speed whenever you really, like, pump it, or if you put it on rail and it squirts, I'm like, bro, it's just quick. Well, Duke, talking surfboards with you is always super easy, bro.
Easy and addicting.
I love, love, love Supernova. I just want to say congratulations. And thank you for working with me. This board is so fun.
Man, it's been an honor and a privilege, man. It's been an experience.
Yeah, so I'm calling what I'm doing right now, working with some of the best shapers in the world, like yourself.
Where?
Yeah. This is basically designing my dream quiver.
Okay.
This is board number 2. And I really don't want to ride anything else right now.
It made the cut?
Oh, no. This is Dream Quiver. Board number 2, Performance Groveler, one of the best boards I've ridden to date.
Did you get that? I hope you got that.
I'm fired up. Hey guys, this board's super legit. Duke Ipa, just the legacy your dad left behind. You and your brother are both amazing shapers. It's been such a privilege and an honor to work with you. And I'm really hoping our surf community gets on one and they have as good a time as I'm having them.
Right on. Thanks, brother.
Yeah. Hey, if you like the show, subscribe, ring the bell so you don't miss an episode, and give us a thumbs up if you like our content. Until next time, we'll see you in the water. Bye-bye.